We're jumping into our next book now, and it's Lessons by Ian McEwan. Tell us all about it, Fiona.
Yeah, so as you can see, Lessons, it's almost 500 pages of a novel there, so it definitely is
It's a tomb.
It is. It is a tomb. So basically it centres around a character called Ronald, and it's essentially his life story, and it goes from his childhood right up to his present day, where he's in his mid-70s, and it's set against the backdrop of all these sort of world historical events such as World War II, and we have the fall of the Berlin Wall, there's Chernobyl, right up to COVID. And at the beginning of the book, he has been abandoned by his wife, an aspiring novelist, himself and his newborn baby. And then it goes back to him reflecting on his childhood and where he attended. It was a state-run boarding school, so essentially he was getting a private education but without the fees. And his father always had a love of music, so enrolled him in piano lessons. And it's during these lessons where two things really unfold. The first thing is that it's discovered that he's a really naturally gifted musician, very, very talented pianist. And the second thing is that he ends up being sexually abused by his female piano teacher and effectively groomed right up until the age of just before he's 16. And then it's how this impacts on the rest of his life. It also sort of raises questions then as well on motherhood and fatherhood. And his wife, Alyssa, becomes an incredibly prominent novelist after she abandons her family. She's incredibly successful. And then you look at Ronald, who's an aspiring poet, has had a few little things published, but never reaching really any pinnacle of success. And then same with his music. After he left school and failed all his exams, he sort of abandoned his classical training and leaned more into jazz and was in a few bands, and he ended up playing piano in a tea room in a very fancy hotel, but actually never really reaching that pinnacle of success that he seemed destined for when he was younger, particularly in his musical career. And it's sort of asking that question that with art and motherhood or parenthood or any of those things, do you have to abandon that or abandon your ties, familial ties, to reach that real pinnacle success in art, if you want to call it that? Whereas in comparison to Ronald, is it the reason he didn't have that success because of the abuse that he suffered as a child, or because he had full parenting responsibilities for a young child and raising his son Lawrence as a single parent, and how that impacted where he had to make a living writing poems and greeting cards to make money to be able to pay rent and food and things like that, whereas his wife had she's likened to Doris Lessing character. It's actually mentioned as a comparison in the actual book. So I found that really interesting too. And it's like reflecting on it, there's no judgment at all.
So he asks these questions, but he doesn't, does he offer up answers?
Not really. I think it's just pondering. It's like a reflection. It feels like it's just a reflection on the surface of his life that happened, and it delves into his parents' life and his in-laws' life, and he never judges his wife for what she has done. And when he actually reads her novel that has come out, her first novel, which is a massive success, he agrees that she couldn't have written that novel if she stayed with him and her son, which I found really fascinating.
Well, Ian McEwan has written 17 novels. Are you familiar with him? Is this a typical Ian McEwan book? I understand he wrote it during lockdown, which, I mean, I only put on weight. I didn't write a book. I would have loved to have written a book. But, you know, he wrote it in lockdown. Is there any of that in it that feels...
I found it very different to his other books. Like, I've read Atonement and one or two other ones, and this one, it's like a meandering sort of life story, and like that, are you separating fact from fiction? And he did actually attend the school that's talked about here, and we mentioned before, was it autofiction? Is it not autofiction? It reads like autofiction.
He has commented, I think, recently and said there is autofiction, which I think is an intriguing way to sell it.
Yeah.
We'll all be reading through it, trying to discover which is truth and which is the fiction, you know?
Yeah. And even reading about the abuse in it as well, I think because it's like how the females are in this book. So he has a wife who abandons him and a child in late 70s, which would have been unheard of. And completely cuts ties, doesn't want anything at all to do with them again. And then he is sexually abused by a female teacher. So it's
He's turned that on its head.
Completely on its head. And when you're reading it then as well, and him talking about it after the fact as well, and how he talks about the abuse and all the feelings that surround that, and how has that filtered or trickled through the rest of his life. And again, there doesn't seem to be the judgment or the blame there, because as a child, he felt that he was in love and this was a loving relationship. But whereas an adult, he knows it's abuse, but he still has those feelings of love mixed in there. So it's, as a reader, that's
fascinating.
Yeah.
Especially in terms of society's ideas now. It's a huge book. There's a lot of commitment there. Is that commitment going to pay off?
I think so. Now, I will say it took me a while to get into this, and if I was reading this not for the show, I'm not convinced, would you stick with it? But that's just me personally. That's nothing on the book, that's nothing on the writing. Like, the writing is absolutely beautiful in it. But I'm really glad that I read this. I can't stop thinking about it afterwards, and it's like that. There's nothing heavy-handed in it. There's no pretentiousness with it or anything at all like that. There's no, as I said, there's no judgment. It doesn't feel like there's an agenda there. It's just,
I'm intrigued by the change of genders, and I think that's going to be really interesting for me to read, and how I judge that, and how people at home, when they're reading it, how they feel that. Because we've been told and accepted as a society the difference between a male perpetrator and a female perpetrator. So that's intriguing.
Really
from him.
Fascinating, yeah.
Thank you.